Excellent. So my name is Ahmed Samir. I work as Managing Director of the Clean Energy Business Council, CEBC. It's my pleasure to announce that this is our first webinar in a series of webinars and hopefully other activities as well in partnership with the National Association of Energy Service Companies based out of the US. This webinar aims to give a comprehensive overview of the energy services market in the United States and the Middle East and North Africa region, MENA, and also to provide some key learnings and recommendations for the MENA region as a developing market based on the developments and experience from the US market. This webinar should be very useful for both policymakers as well as industry professionals across the MENA region and also the United States. So with that, I would like to start the webinar by welcoming all the esteemed speakers we have and also all the attendees who are joining us. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Rashid Hamida, who is the CEBC Board of Director for the energy efficiency activities we have, and also the Vice President of Energy and Technology at Innova, to give the opening remarks. So Rashid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome in this panel discussion. Let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Rashid Hamida. I'm a VP Energy and Technology at Innova and acting as a board member in the CEBC. I'm very happy to be here with you and honored on behalf of all the CEBC members and sponsors to have this opportunity to open this panel discussion by introducing this organization in a few words. The Clean Energy Business Council, CEBC, is a non-profit, non-governmental association that brings together leading local and international organizations in the MENA clean energy sector, from both private and public spheres. It's the only clean energy industry group to cover the MENA region. The CEBC is leading a forum for local, international corporations and government entities focused on development and deployment of clean energy in MENA region. We promote constructive dialogue and collective action by all stakeholders in order to guide public policy and the private investment in the region growing in the clean energy sector. The CEBC constantly contributes to provide its members with updates of the latest developments in the clean energy policy, research, technology, and opportunities to grow their organizations and network with high-level industry players. CEBC is an accredited observer at the Green Climate Fund and the partner of the UNDP ARENA Coalition and the Research Council of Oman and Masdar. We are active across the MENA region with our working groups and programs, a range of events and networking opportunities, and by promoting connections between private and public organizations. Some of our missions are promote the clean energy industry and inform the wider community of the benefits of the sector, collaborate with government agencies and other stakeholders in policy developments and regulation, coordinate the gathering of data and information of the sector to ensure relevant benchmarking and transparency, establish a leading forum for companies and government entities focused on the development and deployment of clean energy in the MENA region. And last but not least, we are developing also a series of strategic alliances with research institutions, international associations, media, and others to drive the delivery of clean energy solutions in MENA. To support those initiatives, we had established an active and dynamic working groups, such as Future Mobility Club, Energy Efficiency, Climate Finance, Energy Storage and Hydrogen, and last but not least, Women in Clean Energy. I hope that you have a better insight about the CEBC. I look forward to meeting you either virtually or physically in others events soon. and I wish you to enjoy the following panel discussions. And now it's time to leave the floor to Riyad and Ahmed, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Rashid. So if anyone is interested to know more about CEBC and the work we do, you can either visit our website, cebcmena.com, or send us an email, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. It will also be great if we have Tim. So Tim will, he has a presentation from, he's the Executive Director of the National Association of ESCOs in the US, and he will be giving a short introduction about the National Association of ESCOs within his presentation. So with that, I would like to introduce the core of our webinar today. We'll have a panel discussion, which will consist of 4 different presentations covering the MENA and the US ESCO landscape, then 2 case studies from each of the 2 regions. Then we'll have a short panel discussion at the end. So with that, I would like to introduce the panel moderator, Rida Sabuni, who is the Managing Director of the MENA region for energetics, to introduce himself and the panel discussion. So Rida, over to you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Yeah, so we will have a panel discussion towards the end of the discussion today, and we look forward to having that. To start, though, we will begin with Tim Unruh, who is with the Executive Director of the National Association of Energy Service Companies, and he will start off with 10 minutes talking about the American ESCO landscape. Following that, we'll be getting into the GCC ESCO landscape. Then we'll have 2 case studies, one focusing on the USA market and another on the MENA market. So with that, Tim, do you want to take us away with the first presentation?
Thank you, Rida. And it's great to be here with you today. And Ahmed, Rashid, it's wonderful that you were able to have us here with you today to be able to talk about what's going on in the United States market and to show some case studies as we move forward in our industry. I'll give a brief introduction of NAESCO, of who we are and what we represent. I'm going to talk about the U.S. market, the size of it, and the growth stages, and then just some of the drivers of the market, what makes our market work. So as we look at the National Association of Energy Service Companies, we call it NAESCO because we like to use our acronyms here in the United States quite a bit. We're the trade association for energy service companies in the United States. We've been around since 1983. We have about 110 members. Actually, I think if I think back, we've actually grown. I think we have 118 members today. So we're growing quite rapidly last year and this year. We have both ESCOs and affiliates are companies that supply services to ESCOs. In the United States, there's about a $7 billion market of projects annually. And projects include energy efficiency, renewable energy, sustainability. We also do resiliency projects. And most of the projects we do in the United States are done at public facilities. So I want to show you a graph of our market and give you an idea of what it looks like. So you should be able to see a chart on the screen that is a result of ESCO industry growth from 1990 to 2018. What you can see is the light blue bars represent some speculative amounts of growth based on the current state, but we're somewhere right around $7 billion today. We have a new study that's coming out. It should be released here probably in the next couple of months, but we believe it's going to show about a 4 or 5% increase in growth from the last year as we look at the ESCO market. But the ESCO market in the United States at $7 billion may actually be underestimated because we don't have good tracking of all the different companies that are doing energy service company work. But we do see quite a bit of opportunity in our market. We've also seen some tremendous growth starting out of this year with government incentives in response to the COVID pandemic. So we've had quite a bit of growth just in that piece there through this year. As we think about the market in the United States, our market has really transitioned quite significantly. It started out many years ago just being lighting retrofits, and lighting retrofits grew and become a larger part of the project. But then what happened in the United States is that lighting companies came in and specialized in lighting. And so ESCOs began to use the lighting companies and incorporated those into the project. And then as we moved forward, we went to the next stage where we had HVAC and controls became dominant in the project. And then, mechanical contractors learned to do that installation, and ESCO started partnering with them. And now today we see a lot of photovoltaic and renewable technologies coming into projects. But even then, those technologies are being specialized by solar photovoltaic companies, and even financing that comes in especially for solar photovoltaic. And those projects now are being incorporated with ESCOs as well. And so what you see in the ESCO market in the United States is an ESCO today in the US is a company that effectively has many partners or affiliates per se of NESCO that come in and provide components of the project. And what happens is that the ESCO becomes the bundler that puts them all together, provides the overall project design, the overall construction management, and most importantly, provides the performance guarantee that the project will keep working for potentially 15 to 20 years, because that's how long projects are in the United States. So we have to have a strong assurance that those projects will endure for a long, long period of time. Today, what we see the evolution of the market is that technologies are always at the foundation of our projects, but we're seeing new shapes of contracts and new kinds of financing coming in and fitting into the projects. A new trend in the United States is energy as a service, where an owner comes in, an ESCO comes in and buys out all of the equipment in a facility and effectively owns and operates that equipment for a fee back to the facility. And so that might mean a building that exists might have components in that building like the boiler plant or chiller plant or the control system owned by a third party. And that third party has to own it, operate it, and maintain it and assure that it is properly operating to keep the building running. So it's an interesting market trend that we have. One of the things about our particular market is that we really focus on public facilities. So this next slide I'm sharing with you is a picture of our market division. Our last data was in 2014, but it still holds pretty true today. When we look at the market division, at the top we have the federal government at about a fifth of our market, or 21%. A quarter of our market is state and local government, and another quarter of our market is K through 12 schools. That's kindergarten through 12th grade, which would be all the schools of elementary through secondary schools. There is a pretty good market for universities. There's a pretty good market for healthcare, like hospitals, and there's a pretty good market for public housing. But if you notice at the very bottom, the 8% represents the commercial market or industrial market. So in the United States, the commercial industrial market is very, very small and does not get nearly the attention that the rest of the market, the public buildings. So if you would represent this somewhere around the $7 billion mark, you can see that this is probably somewhere between $500 and $600 million, where the rest of the market is a significant growth. K-12 schools is a strong and growing area. One of the areas that was a focus of the government incentives for COVID was improving our K-12 schools and making the ventilation better than it was before. And so K-12 schools has seen a growth spurt, but just recently money came out for state and local governments that will help those grow as well. So we have quite a bit of market transition. Through 2020, the ESCOs that we have in our organization saw a lot of drop initially with the pandemic, but then quickly as buildings became the focus and ventilation became the focus, we saw a very rapid ramp up of work through the second half of 2020. And we still see that growing stronger in 2021, where business is extremely strong for our members in 2021. There was some concern that business development or the sales cycle was challenging. In the United States, the sales cycle can take quite a bit of time, up to 2 years before a signed contract occurs. And the reason for that is that often in the government sector, decisions are made by groups of people, and so you have a significant effort that the salesperson has to go through to go from a preliminary analysis to determine if there's a project at the site, if there's something worth pursuing, to doing a comprehensive analysis, and then working out the contractual details and getting the design to meet the customer's expectations. In the federal projects, this 21% piece here at the top, those projects on average take 24 months to develop. in the K through 12 school market, they take a lot less time. They can develop as short as 4 or 5 months, but can take as long as a year. Often a K through 12 school project is driven by the need for summer vacation in the United States when school is not in session, that all the work has to happen in that period. So if you start a development project in December, it has to be ready to be built by May when school is released. When we look at the United States market, the government is really the driver of our market, because the government is often leading with mandates to try to improve their public facilities. So for example, if a government passes a rule that says government facilities need to save 35% of their energy or be so much sustainable, or maybe they want them to be net zero or zero energy use, or maybe they want to reduce the CO2 or carbon output of the facilities. Legislators in the United States pass those rules, but they don't provide funding to accomplish that. And those become what are called unfunded mandates. And in general, facilities are underfunded to begin with. And so facility operators trying to meet the expectation of reduction are faced with lack of funds, and that's where performance contracting and private financing comes in and fills the gap. So one of the things I'd like to do before I end my session is we've got a poll question, and I think Ahmed is running the polls. Ahmed, can you put up poll number, the number 3 that we had? So poll number 3 is, I kind of want a comparison of what the market that we see in the MENA region. Do we think it's schools, universities, federal, commercial, or industrial? So Ahmed, I assume the poll is open?
Yes, Tim, it's on. People
All right.
are, I think, it's coming. Yeah. We can give it a few seconds, then I can close it and show the results.
Okay. You let me know when you close it, and you can tell us the results.
Sure. Okay, I think now most of the attendees have already submitted, so we can close.
Great.
Share. Okay, so I think majority, almost 46% are federal or local government. Next would be commercial, 38%. Then you have both universities and industrial almost equal with 8%, and there's 0% for schools.
Interesting, 0% for schools, and that market represents 25% of the U.S. market. I don't know the marketplace there, but potentially schools are an opportunity with savings potential there. So that concludes my presentation. So I'll turn it back over to Rita to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, so I look forward to this discussion. But until then, we have our next speaker is going to be so Mustafa Anzi. He's the General Manager for Energy Solutions GCC at Johnson Controls. So Mustafa, would you like to go next, please?
Let me think about it, Rida. Or actually, no problem. No, it's okay. Definitely. Can you see my screen, by the way, or not yet?
If you could just put it into full screen, though, we
Yeah.
see only the slides.
Absolutely.
And your camera as well.
So that's the camera's not visible. Okay. It should be fine now then.
Yes, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and also for the CEBC for organizing this webinar. In this section, we will be looking at 3 aspects. One is the MENA region, because we have also attendees from outside the region, which might not be familiar with the MENA region. Then we have an overview of the super ESCOs in the region, and we will conclude with the ESCO survey 2020. So So as you can see, the MENA region stretches all the way from Morocco to Iran and also includes the GCC countries, which are Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, Oman, Qatar, and Kuwait. And we see that the main drivers in these markets for the ESCOs is the increase in energy and utility tariffs. Several countries have actually increased the tariff for electricity and for water, which helps actually develop the ESCO markets in those countries. Another driver is the sustainability targets. More and more private and public entities are embracing sustainability and therefore setting very ambitious targets to reduce their carbon footprints. Another driver is the emergence of super ESCOs that we have seen in the region. Around 10 years back, we didn't have any super ESCOs in the region. However, nowadays we have a number of them. So in the next couple of slides, we will go through the different super ESCOs. Here you can see the super ESCOs that are based in UAE. There are in total 4 entities that are playing the role of super ESCO. And then we have Saudi Arabia with Tarshid. And in Oman, we have the Authority for Public Services and Regulations. So in the next slide, you can see the comparison that is made for the different, okay, one second. You can see the comparison that is made for the different super ESCOs. Etihad ESCO is the oldest super ESCO in the region. It was established in 2013, and it is based in Dubai and covering the Dubai market. Their role is actually to be a signing entity with the ESCO. That means that when they develop an ESCO project, they sign with the ESCO on one hand, and on the other side, they sign with the client. When you look at REAM, which is based in Ras Al Khaimah, that was established in 2017, they're covering the Ras Al Khaimah market, and they're more like a facilitator. So they will not be signing with the ESCO nor with the client, but they facilitate the process, and at the end, it's the ESCO who signs with the client. In 2017, also, Tarshid was established, which is the National Energy Services Company in Saudi Arabia. And of course, their geography is the kingdom itself to address the energy consumption. And they're also an entity that sits between the ESCO and the client. Then we have the Sharjah Electricity, Water and Gas Authority. In 2018, they started their program for ESCO accreditation and have been facilitating some projects in the Emirate of Sharjah. So they're also not a player in the contractual part of the process, but more the facilitator. In 2019, the Authority for Public Services and Regulation floated the first ESCO tender in Oman, and they're also playing the role of facilitator, where they facilitate the project or the process, and the ESCO sign directly with the end users, with the client. Then we have ADIS, which is our latest super ESCO here in the region, and based in Abu Dhabi. And they're an entity that is signing between the ESCO on one hand, and on the other hand, they're signing also with the client. So moving on to the project financing. So do the super ESCOs also provide financing for the projects that they are executing? So for Etihad ESCO, the answer is yes, they provide financing, also on-bill financing. Etihad ESCO is owned by the utilities company in Dubai, and therefore have access to on-bill financing. The target savings for 2030 are said to be 1.4 terawatt hours of savings and around 4.9 billion imperial gallons. For Ras Al Khaimah, they are not providing project financing and also not doing on-bill financing. The targets that are set for Ras Al Khaimah is to save 55 gigawatt hours of electricity and around 48 million imperial gallons by 2030. For the other participants, we have not received the data with regards to the questions. With ADIS, we received answer on the project financing part, where ADES will be providing the funding for the projects, also doing on-bill financing, and the targets for Abu Dhabi are set to be 2.7 terawatt-hours of electricity savings and 2 billion imperial gallon of water. So the next slide, we will look at the volume of projects that have been launched in the market. Etihad ESCO has floated around 100 plus projects in the market with a value of around 218 million US dollars. The savings that are resulting from these projects are around $32 million per year of energy savings, including both electricity and water. Looking at the REAM based in Ras Al Khaimah, they have floated 18 tenders with a project value of $7 million plus. These projects will provide Ras Al Khaimah with an annual saving of around 2 million dirham, $2 million per year. Saudi Arabia with Tarshid have actually floated a significant amount of tenders in the market, 200 plus, and the value of this project is reaching 266 million US dollars. The savings from these projects were not received in monetary values, so only in kilowatt hours. So therefore, we'll move to the next slides. And as you can see here, the most recent entities in Oman and Abu Dhabi, they have floated a tender, but still the projects need to be awarded, and of course then the numbers will start to populate. Then looking at the type of projects that were floated by the different super ESCOs or facilitated, we see in Dubai that 80% of the retrofit, or 80% of the projects were related to retrofit and 20% solar. While the market segments that were addressed were 91% residential, 5% government buildings, and 4% commercial. In Ras Al Khaimah, we see similar numbers approximately for retrofit and solar, with 85% of the project being retrofit and 15% being solar. When it comes to the market segments, also the majority of the project were government buildings, 70%. Were commercial buildings, 70%, and 30% were government buildings. In Saudi Arabia, the focus of Tarshid is purely on government buildings. So 100% of the facilities that were addressed were government buildings, which include also hospitals, schools, and other government-owned facilities. In Oman, also, again, 100% of the facilities were government buildings. And also Abu Dhabi with ADES is addressing 100% government buildings. So this is with regards to the Super ESCO and their setup. To get more information about the ESCO market here in the region, you can also have a look at the CEBC ESCO survey that was launched in 2019, and also the CEBC published a white paper on the results, which you can find on the CEBC website if you're interested to know more about the ESCO market here in the region. This year also the CEBC will be publishing a white paper for a new survey that was done, a follow-up of the survey in 2019. The survey was done in 2020, and this year the publication will be happening. We'll just give you a sneak preview of two of these of the questions that are part of that white paper, and then later on this year you will get an email if you subscribe to the newsletter about the launch of the white paper. So a question that was part in the 2020 survey was asking the ESCOs in which region or country are you currently active as an ESCO. The majority of the ESCOs that responded to the survey were based in the United Arab Emirates, followed by Saudi Arabia and MENA and Oman. When it comes to their future plans in expanding to the MENA region, the question was, are you planning to open a branch in another country or region in the near future? And here we see that the Saudi Arabia market is attracting more and more ESCOs. You can see that the majority of the ESCOs that are planning to expand in the region are focusing on the Saudi Arabia market, where they mentioned that within 1 year they would like to open a branch in Saudi Arabia. Secondly, followed by Abu Dhabi, which of course creates some expectations for ADES to help us with the ESCO market in Abu Dhabi. But the interest is there for the ESCOs to expand further into different markets. So these were just 2 questions from the survey, and as soon as the white paper is ready, it will be announced by CEBC. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Rida.
Thank you, Mustafa, for the presentation, and look forward to talking with you more and to compare the different markets. Actually, some interesting similarities and differences are emerging. Okay, but to keep us going, we'll go to the next presentation, which will be actually our first case study. So we're looking first at the USA market, and we have David Turner joining us, who is the Regional Manager for Energy and Sustainability with Siemens from the United States. And he's going to be talking us through this case study on Corning Community College. So David, do you want to show your camera? And you could go ahead next.
There you go. Can you see my screen?
We do see your screen.
Okay, great. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So this is a typical ESCO type project in the US market. This is for the Corning Community College in New York State. What is very important for any ESCO in the US is underlying energy law. You know, we have to have an underlying legislation that supports the use of the ESCO model for public entities. That is very important. And the New York State uses Article 9 energy law, which allows them to monetize the savings in their systems and use it to fund construction. So that's very important. That's one of the key elements in the US market, is having that underlying legislation to support the ESCO business. It's a fairly simple process. We start working with the customer to educate them on the idea of doing an ESCO project, whatever vertical we're talking to. They have to go through their procurement process. In the US, pretty much 100% of public entities have to go through a competitive bidding process. Sometimes we can do an RFP, sometimes we can do an RFQ, which does not require a lot of upfront numbers and qualifications. So they go through the procurement process. Hopefully we are chosen, we are awarded, and then we go through the typical energy process, which is, you know, putting together the detailed energy analysis. We call it an IGA, an investment grade audit. That qualifies the project, and then they sign a contract and we execute the project and then go into the long-term monitoring and verification. The monitoring and verification ensures that the performance of the energy savings is kept up, and if there is a shortfall, then the ESCO pays a check to the customer to cover the difference. So that, in a nutshell, that is the energy business. So it's very important in the US market to establish the process, underlying contract vehicle with the law, and then establish the process with the customer, so it's very clear on how the project will get executed and everybody's expectations. We approach it as a very true partnership. It's very important that you work with the customers to understand their needs and what they're looking for. A lot of customers are very nervous about doing a large project. They don't necessarily have the expertise. So we provide very strong project management and oversight and engineering. And then, you know, they're very nervous about making sure that the long-term revenues are assured and made. So, you know, we have a very strong performance assurance team that works with them over the period of the contract, which are typically 15 to 20 years. On the right-hand side, you can't really see the details, but that is, we come up with a preliminary FIM list, facility improvement measures, to really qualify what is available, what is the art of the opportunity on the job.
Audio.
Sorry, can you hear me okay? But very importantly, we make sure that we sit down and go through a process with the customer to really prioritize, what they need to get done. It can't just be what we feel needs to be done. It really needs to meet their business needs and meet the end use needs of the users of the facilities. So that's a process we go through. It's a services priority workshop where we take all of those FIMs, all of those ideas that we have, and we reprioritize them with the customer, and then we create the actual final project out of it. Some of the areas are, customer service, aesthetics, sustainability, safety, technology. This is the example of the one we did for Corning, where it was clearly prioritized. Sustainability was very important to them. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, and then also the use of technology. How do we get technology into the school to help them run the business better, but also to be used for the teaching as a part of the curriculum for the teachers to actually use the data from the new systems and the data from the technology in the classroom. So those are the priorities that came out of that process. The project goals and the deliverables that came about, and what you're seeing here are typical project deliverables and solutions that customers are looking for. I'm not going to read all of them, but 9 times out of 10 they want to improve the efficiency of the systems and the comfort in the buildings. They may have old, inefficient equipment, and everybody wants to make sure that they can produce a project that is self-funding. These projects are a way of not using their capital funding. Obviously, especially in today's world, capital is very scarce and very hard to get hold of, and is typically applied to very much business-facing opportunities with very short payback. So the ESCO business is now seen as a very nice overlay of that, which can help reduce their capital budget by taking a lot of the capital needs and putting it into an ESCO project. So it works in harmony with their typical capital process. Everybody wants technology. Everybody's looking for data. So this was a reasonably small project. Typical ESCO projects in the US range from about 2 million up to about 20 million. Average being about 8-9 million. That's a typical size ESCO project for the schools, hospitals, universities, and local government projects that we do. So this one you can see is about a $3.9 million project. Had a good amount of savings, and the positive cash flow over the life was fairly strong for them. So they redirected some of that positive cash into some of their teaching and curriculum efforts, and got some programs for things like smart building technicians programs that Siemens was able to deploy for them. A typical mix of electrical, building automation, solar PV. As we said, we're seeing a lot of renewables. Building envelopes, sealing up the buildings. A lot of the building stock in the US is old, older than 50 years. So a lot of leaks, a lot of issues. And then mechanical improvements. Again, the building stock you're seeing in the US is a pretty, 70s vintage, 70s, 80s. So there's a lot of end of life equipment that really can be addressed under these projects that they can't get out of capital because the payback is too short, it's too long, sorry. I'll go through really quickly. So there was water source heat pumps and the mechanical. We converted, they didn't have a lot of air conditioning on the site, so we helped them through that. And what we do is we look at the main project, and then we look at some other projects for future consideration in light gray. We always look at a larger portfolio of ideas and then bring it down to a project that can cash flow. We always highlight the benefits. So there was mechanical improvements for water source heat pumps. It's just a nice 200 kilowatt ground mount solar project. Building automation, getting everything under control, making sure that you can transmit the data and have actionable data to run the business better. So a lot of benefits from that. Lighting upgrades is still a key core element to ESCO projects in the US. There's such a short payback with LEDs, and also the benefits from a lot of data systems that can go into the LEDs. So you're building an IoT, Internet of Things system within the facility that can have overlays of other apps that can be very beneficial. And then building envelopes is a very simple, seal up the windows and seal up the doors because it gets very cold and very hot. So you have to, have both those issues in the US. And then finally, miscellaneous improvements. We look for everything we can, even Coca-Cola vending machines or other types of vending machines that can be switched off during periods of non-use in a college. Can save quite a lot of money, and things like destratification fans where you've got hot air up in the ceilings of large gymnasiums and you bring that hot air down to circulate the air better. So that is an overview of a typical US ESCO project, and these are the types of projects we do many of over and over. And the markets are municipal, local government, universities, hospitals, K through 12, and higher education universities like Corning. So that's it. I'll be looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, David. Yes, I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. I want to remind the audience, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please do raise them in the questions portion of the GoToWebinar control panel. I see a few questions have come in already, and thank you for that. And we will be asking those questions during the discussion, which will begin just after this next presentation, which will be from Masood Raza, who is Head of Operations. And he will be presenting on the MENA region case study. Do you want to go next? Go ahead, Masood. Masood, you're muted. If you could unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants from all over the world. We wish you the best of health during this pandemic. And definitely the pandemic has affected all sectors of business, whether construction or otherwise. However, during this tough time also, there are some smart building operators who have used this shutdown time efficiently to change old stock of their equipment and go ahead and reap the benefit as soon as the business comes back online. The difference between states and MENA region is basically that whatever mandate is there in MENA is only for the government buildings mostly, whereas in states it seems the mandate is for legislation is for all kinds of buildings. We warmly welcome the partnership between ESCO and CEBC, and we are looking forward to continuing fruitful exchange of ideas across both the continents. Now, just briefly about GECO. GECO is a 50-year-old company, part of Al-Batha Group, 28,000 strong people working out of Sharjah, and we have got at least 7 full-fledged divisions. What it does is allows us to provide inter-departmental coordination and offer the best solution to all our consumers, all our customers, clients, whoever they are. The divisions involve MEP mostly, major, but we have also got power division, we have got fire division, we have also got FM services. This project that has been done by us as which we are featuring here is in cooperation with FM division and the ESCO division within GECO. Now, what is happening in UAE in terms of retrofit? Almost all municipalities, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, or Ras Al Khaimah, they have all embarked on a very ambitious program of retrofit of the existing buildings. UAE is relatively a new country, so you don't have many old stocks, but whatever are the old buildings, they are very energy inefficient because they have old construction material used, and the equipment are also very, very old. And mostly they are energy guzzlers. The other difference between states and UAE in terms of energy is that around 70% of the load or electrical power consumption inside a building is for HVAC equipment, and HVAC unfortunately is a necessity in this part of the world, so you can't switch it off, probably not even during winter time. And the other problem which is faced here very regularly is that around the buildings are the air conditioning systems in the buildings are generally 20 to 30% over designed. This is because of many local factors which are not very clear why so much is there, but it is there. Now, as far as UAE is concerned, they have decided to go 50% of their requirement from sustainable energy sources, including nuclear power, by 2050. However, there is a study by Emirates Green Building Council, EGBC, that was published in 2020 October, advancing deep retrofit in UAE. The conclusion of that study was that 50% reduction in on-site energy demand is possible, and it recommends to reduce the energy consumption by retrofit before installing clean energy sources. So in this background, we should have a look at our case study that we are presenting here. So why do we need retrofit in UAE market? There are basically 2-3 reasons. One is that the older buildings have older equipment who have run their life and they need to be replaced. The old equipment were all constant speed systems, having no relationship between supply side and demand side. Now also there are many VSD based equipment which provide a lot of saving because they try to match the supply and demand curves. There's another issue is that because of the harsh environment in the Gulf, the equipment usually have a higher failure rate. The wear and tear is more in this part of the world than other places. Also, the maintenance is not very professional. So, as GECO, whenever we receive any inquiry for retrofit, we always club the retrofit with a study for energy with our energy audit team, which gives the idea, a clear idea to the client about what he should be doing and how much he should be investing at the first go. We generally propose that the investment should be in stages rather than just one go. And the reason is that we always go for audit because we see that every equipment is not as efficient as it was there initially. And the interesting thing is that even though the equipment is very energy inefficient and the owner is paying very high bills, it's very difficult to convince him to go for a major retrofit. Instead, he blames the FM services and says, this is because of your unprofessional maintenance that we are facing these high bills, so you better improve it. Now, most likely, whenever there is a chance, or the chance comes only when there is a frequent breakdown of an equipment. But when this chance comes, that is an opportunity for the contractors to propose to the client load sizing again. That means deciding about the capacity of the air conditioning plant all over again, designing it in a right way. Now, the facility that we are talking of is a commercial club, the Aries Club in Sharjah. It was having 3 chillers, 226 TR installed. They had a combined capacity of 678 TR, 3 primary pumps, no secondary pump, no variable pumps, 19 connected AHUs, no speed control, no CPM for the chillers, very low delta T. You can see in this graph, it was average of about 2 degrees C. During peak, 3 chillers run. They were manually run because there is no CPM and no sequencing is there. When we studied this, then when we went there, we put our PMUs and BTU meters, measured for a week, which covered occupied and unoccupied hours, and we reached a regression between a correlation study between the tonnage of refrigeration versus the CDD. It was a good correlation, 0.7703. So we decided to extrapolate it for the whole of the year, and we found that the total peak TR for the year was 385 TR, whereas just 226 into 2, around 445 TR could be achieved only from 2 chillers rather than 3 chillers. In this background, what we offered to the client is, we told them to go only for replacement of two chillers rather than the 3 chillers at a time. Use VFD chillers, the latest ones, which give you the most energy efficient performance. We also told them to change CPM for better chiller plant control, and we recommended the pumping system to be modified to primary and secondary with secondary variable speed pumping. Because we were in any case changing the 3-way valve, 2-way valve, we went for the efficient PICV valves also. With this, we convinced the client to go for a 2-stage retrofit and just change only 2 chillers and fund the 3rd chiller from the savings of the installed 2 chillers. These are the savings achieved. Our study was done in September 18 to May 19. The retrofit happened during the shutdown period. As soon as the buildings started operating from September 20 to May 21, the savings data are available. We have made a saving till date in 9 months of around 59% only on the chiller feeder. Please make sure that we are measuring only the chiller feeders, not the total building load. So 59% on the chiller loading. So the conclusion is that $1 million investment on the total project, which involved 11 AHUs also, 2 new VFD chillers also. We are able to now make a saving of 578,000 AED, which is around $158K, which is about 59% of the baseline consumption, which is $268,000. The energy cost in UAE is 12 cents per kilowatt hour. The total project value was 3.7 million, as I said, yani $1 million. 1.2 million of that was the chiller cost, which is $327,000. $327,000. And the savings that we have made, 1 chiller can be bought within 9 months saving. And we are now telling our client to replace the 3rd chiller also, even though it will be kept as a standby, and a standby is a requirement for the client. They always want the standby to be there. For anything else, additional information, and you can get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Masood. So I would like to invite Tim, Masood, David, and Mustafa to join as well. Masood, if you could maybe stop sharing your screen, and let's get into this discussion. I think there's a lot of interesting questions that have come in. Please, anyone else in the audience, if you would like to pose any questions, I will be reviewing those. And let's just get into this discussion for maybe about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. So, okay, so let me just start. I'm curious to understand the market drivers. I want to get a little bit more into market drivers. So in the MENA region, we saw the prevalence of the super ESCOs and just how important they are. Mustafa, you covered that very well. Across the different countries in the region have super ESCOs in maybe various stages of their development. Not the case as much in the US. I'd like to understand, the greatest market drivers across these two regions, and maybe a comment on the value of super ESCOs, in the MENA region, and what the drivers are really in the US. Does anyone want to start off this? Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start off on that. So market drivers in the U.S., since our market is primarily the public sector, I think it's two primary drivers. One is that these government buildings are continually under pressure from the public and from the legislatures to reduce, lower costs, and improve their buildings. At the same time, those same people do not want to pay for maintaining their buildings. They don't want to pay for improving their buildings. So the buildings are in a significant state of disrepair. We call that deferred maintenance, where maintenance that was needed was put off and that piece of equipment was patched as best possible, and they just keep on going. And so what you have buildings that are in desperate need for work and improvement, plus you have a heavy pressure for them to become sustainable and lower energy consuming. And so those two things, I think, are some major drivers in the U.S. market for the ESCO business. But maybe, David, you've run into some other things as well.
No, there's stress on every public entity not to raise taxes for the folks that live in the town necessarily. So they don't want to go for capital. They want to try and offset the capital with existing savings out of existing budgets. We also have a lot of pressure, a lot of government mandates for sustainability. Right, to go green, to create renewable energy, and somebody has to pay for those things. So it's a combination of government-sponsored grant money and utility sponsorship, and using the ESCOs to really make that happen. Because the local constituents, the people that live in the towns, or the people that go to the universities or the schools, don't want to pay extra fees to have that stuff. They want somebody else to pay for that, and that's why the ESCO business is really something they can lean on.
Mustafa or Masood, anything you want to add on the MENA side?
Yeah, MENA has an entirely different story to tell, actually. First thing is our air conditioning, as I mentioned. Air conditioning is the biggest problem, is the guzzler, And the other important thing is that the market itself is sometimes very strange, in the sense that you go to a client, offer him all kinds of saving, ask him also, okay, guys, this is your shared saving model, so you don't have to invest anything. But then, even then, the clients are not convinced. It seems that a mandate is a must. Without mandate, we are just struggling, very badly. And some kind of legislation or some kind of push, is required, a nudge from the authorities to go for this retrofit or energy improvements and all that. The only thing that we are seeing in MENA, which is similar to USA, is that we have also started with the light fitting retrofits, and we keep doing it again and again. So we are together in that one. Yeah, Mustafa, maybe you would like to say something.
Yeah, sure, Mashud, thank you very much. With regards to the super ESCOs, I guess in this region, the whole concept of ESCOs and performance contracting around 10 years back was not, let's say, known in the market. I guess the super ESCOs played a critical role to kind of create that awareness in the market, to also be the to-go-to entity to support both sides, the clients in their journey to get ready for an energy performance contract, and also on the other side to help shape the market by introducing, for example, an accreditation scheme for ESCOs. In Dubai, the regulatory entity, RSB, created, let's say, also standard contracts for performance contracting that are available in the market. Also, the accreditation scheme was managed by them, so that you create, let's say, an equal platform for the ESCOs to compete. And at the same time, you have the super ESCOs that also brought in financing. Like, for example, Rashid, if you see the number of projects they have executed, it's huge. It's more than 200 projects in a very short time span, and also the value reaching up to $266 million is very significant. And that is where you can see that the bringing in the funding as a super ESCO is one of the critical elements in accelerating the process.
Thank you, Mustafa. I want to touch more on, you mentioned mandates, government mandates, and I want to touch more on policy differences because it is very interesting. The U.S. market is much more mature, many more years it's been active, and not as long in the MENA region. David, you mentioned law number 9 in New York. In the United States, it's very fragmented in terms of the states have different policies. I'm curious to understand the importance of the policy as a driver for your work in the United States, and then for the MENA side, I don't think we see government mandates as much. I think maybe we see a little bit in the UAE on the government side, but not really that like we see in the US. So I want to just talk a little bit about the policy differences as drivers.
Yeah, in the US, it's critical. As Mustafa said, it provides the framework it levelizes the business. It authorizes folks to engage on a public level with a private entity. It does provide a level of consistency across the contracting vehicle. The financial vehicles, are all prescribed typically in the legislation. How you will contract, how you will go out and procure. What's the procurement process, and then what is the financial vehicle that is allowed. And typically there is some sort of oversight within each state, that some sort of government agency that provides an oversight, which allows the customers to get comfortable, right? Because they're not the experts, we're the experts, and so they need a third party, especially from the government, verifying that yes, what the ESCO is saying is following a process that's very regulated and trustworthy, and we're going to verify that what they're saying is going, and we're going to hold them to that. So I think that framework is very good. Otherwise, it would be, it would be the Wild West over here, and everybody would do whatever they want. And ESCOs have got a bad name in the past. Before it got organized, because people were making very large promises, they weren't delivering, they weren't executing correctly. So that legislation is a very good way of stabilizing and making sure it's a legitimate business that can deliver what is supposed to be done for the customers. So that's how we welcome, and states that don't have strong legislation tend not to have a big ESCO business. They struggle.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, David. You're exactly right. Is that structure has helped drive our market, in that we have several organizations in the United States that support ESCO work. From my own, the National Association of Energy Service Companies, there's another sister organization called the Energy Services Coalition, which is a partnership of ESCOs and state energy officials working together. And then we even get some support from the National Association of State Energy Officials as well. And so we look at these organizations, and they all work together to make success in our market. And one of the ways we do that is to try to drive consistency and clarity. And as David mentioned, the owner's representatives really help us do that. In addition, we have standardized model contracts that have been developed, and we're supported by the U.S. Department of Energy in that as well, a government agency.
Yeah, and on the MENA side, I mean, a question just came in, on this point, basically asking, in the MENA region, are there any government grant programs to help and encourage building owners to implement energy conservation measures? Mustafa or Masood, are you aware of anything like that, or any comments on the policy side in MENA?
Mustafa will answer it better, but I don't think there is any government support for ESCO investment in terms of, except these super ESCOs, which are there everywhere and everything.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and definitely, Mr. Mashoud. So the super ESCOs, let's say, are providing, like we said, the financing, which should be typically more attractive than getting this financing from elsewhere. There are programs in the MEC in the region that will incentivize the use of energy efficient equipment. So these programs will be rolled out by the respective entities where they want to close the gap between the, for example, 1-star and 5-star AC units, because at the moment, if you go for the cheaper equipment, the energy star is very low because of the performance. So by having this let's say subsidies or compensation, you close the gap for the end user, and they will go for the much more efficient equipment.
Which is better for them in the long term financially, actually, in terms of life cycle savings. Go ahead, Masood.
Yeah, just briefly, there is a talk of RERA introducing point system for the buildings here, which when it is established, I think it will help everyone to go for energy efficiency. There's just one thing I wanted to ask, how long did it take NASCO, especially in the States, for the ESCO companies to mature? Because, when we started district cooling in 2000 in UAE, after so many years, now we have a regulation in UAE for district cooling, both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So how long did it take in the States for regulation to come, proper regulation to come?
Well, when we get there, we'll let you know how long it took. but I do understand your question. The market really began back in the early 1980s for the ESCO industry, and it probably began to stabilize about a decade later. Early to mid 1990s, it began to stabilize. You had a lot of growth in the sector. In the early 90s, we had a lot of utilities come into the ESCO market. And so electric utilities began buying out the small entrepreneurial firms and incorporating that ESCO work into their own portfolio. In the early 90s, there was a big fear as deregulation of the electric utilities in the United States took place that utility companies were going to be fighting for their customers. And so they began to see energy services as a way to retain that customer base. And so they began getting into that market. On the one hand, it did distort the market for a period of time, but on the other, I think that helped to bring some stability to the market because you had larger companies come in and put investment into the market, and investment drives some sense of understanding, because if you're going to put money in, you want to see the structure that you're putting it into. You don't want to just throw it into the wind. And so really, I'd say early to mid 90s, it began to become pretty stable and we understand it. But to my joke at the beginning is, our regulations continue to evolve today, and we still see some states, as David mentioned, some states are still struggling with how to get this put in place. We still have the challenge that was mentioned. I think Rita mentioned the challenge is, you think if you're coming in and offering a project with no capital investment needed, we'll invest in your building, we'll measure the response, and you pay us based on how well it performs. That would seem like a dream project for a facility owner, but yet we still have skeptics that watch on the sideline and throw rocks at the idea. That causes a longer development cycle and more expense in developing the projects, which then limits the overall efficiency that can be installed because of that long duration of development.
I wanted to ask you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mustafa.
No, I just want to say that that's at least one thing, Timothy, what we have in common in the region: the long development periods. We have similar periods also.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I wanted to ask about that point, Tim, that you brought up. It's basically the reluctance of the owners operators to go for these ESCO projects, even though they're being presented with really great financial incentive to do so. This is a prevalent issue in the MENA region. It's a less mature market. It makes sense. Do you have any words of wisdom, advice? I mean, you just mentioned it is still an issue in the US, but anything that you think really resonates in the US market to help overcome that challenge?
I got some. Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I would say you have to start with the basics. Really, really very simplistic diagrams and understanding, and then there's what we find there are four elements to a deal. Is political, right? Is it politically viable? Do they want to do it? Is it technically viable? Is it legally viable? And is it financially viable? And you have to work with those four groups of people within an organization. You can't just focus on one who's maybe your champion, and that's what derails things. You have to have all four of those elements, but you really have to start at the basics, because people in a team environment will just nod and say, yes, this looks, this, I understand this, but they fundamentally don't. And you really have to get everybody grounded in the very basic fundamentals of how these things cash flow and how they work and how the savings are generated and how they're derived and what it means to them. Because if you move too quickly with people nodding their heads, you end up at a disconnect where they're still trying to figure out where they're going to get the capital to do the job. Or how do you do the savings? So it falls apart as the deeper you get in it, and it's a negative experience for everybody. So starting early with very, very simplistic explanations, and just having them feed back to you that they really understand it. And those 4 quadrants of people that are involved in it really can get the project started on a good basis, on a solid basis, because it is too good to be true to most people. It doesn't make sense. Where are you making money is the question. How do you make, where's the cash? Where are you ripping me off? You know, where are you going to make more money?
How much are you charging for the guarantee?
You know, so that's you know, just you've got to really lay out the basics and just show them very, very clearly, and be open and honest. You know, open book pricing, open models. You know, don't close, you know, spreadsheets. Have it very open and just show them everything. That, and getting that trust, that's the key. So,
I believe we also have a marketing issue, I believe, as well. So what happens is the stuff we're doing in energy efficiency. Let's face it. I mean, I don't know how many of us are on the call here are engineers. David, you're an engineer. Rita, you're an engineer. Masood, Mustafa, I don't know if you're engineers or not, but you're working in a technical field. This work is not rocket science. It doesn't. I mean, I have a doctorate in electrical engineering. Rita, you've got a master's in electrical engineering. It's not rocket science. We don't need these advanced, smart people to do this type of work. And so we know what we're doing. We know the energy savings happens. We know that if we replace an old incandescent light bulb with a high efficiency LED, we know it saves energy, and we can calculate that clearly. But in the end, the work we do comes down to it is doing construction in existing facilities. One of the most perilous types of work that you can do, because you don't know what you're going to find when you take that piece of wallboard down, or you open up that panel and you take the cover off. You don't know how bad that wiring was installed initially. Or when you open that air handler, you don't know what's been blocked, taken out, what the filter status is, the belt status, how unbalanced it is. So many things can be wrong in an existing facility. That's if you have the drawings, which often we don't in the United States. The drawings have been lost, changed, or altered, and they're interactive. And so what happens is we do these projects from an ESCO standpoint that are turnkey, and they're performing from beginning to end, meaning that we take responsibility for a project for potentially 2 decades, 20 years potentially. And you think, how many things can go wrong over 20 years? And, you know, I think back over 20 years of my life, and I've had a few things go wrong in my life over 20 years, and I'm betting just about every single person has, and every person listening to us has. And so we recognize that things happen on these projects. A standard construction project, it lasts the duration of the construction, and then they get a 1-year warranty, and then they're out of there and they're gone. Our projects, we stay with it. And so what happens is we have what I call the elusive bad project. Someone can always talk about, well, you know, they did a bad project over there in South Amsterdam the other day, and that project is really bad. And you go to try to ask questions about the South Amsterdam bad project, and you can't find details, you can't find information, because there's just some bad project, and it becomes a rumor that floats around that becomes the justification for not moving forward. We don't want to be caught like South Amsterdam in our project that failed. And so I believe we have a marketing problem in our industry. And I suspect you have it the same in your industry, and that we don't talk enough about the positive projects, because for every one bad project rumor, there's 1,000 successful projects that don't get discussed. And so I challenge all of us to work on promoting the positive of our industry. Write bylines, get things published, webinars like this, get people to invited and understand that these projects are highly successful and they work, and we know what we're doing.
Some great advice, Tim.
Okay.
If there's any other comments from Masood or Mustafa, otherwise I'll move on to the next point.
Well,
Yeah,
just
please.
very interesting to see actually, you know, how things work on in the US. I mean, the market has been, let's say, developing since in the 80s, and Johnson Controls also one of the ESCO companies in North America, active since 1983 with over 3,000 of ESCO projects, and we use the reference in the US a lot in our, let's say, project development. But I can see that there are still a lot of similarities between a mature ESCO market and an emerging ESCO market. Like you said, where is the catch? How much are you making? And this kind of questions we similarly get, but we thought it was more because of it's a relatively new thing, and people are not familiar with it. But I guess humans are humans, and that's the nature of yeah, how they react.
Across both regions, we are humans. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
A quick time check. It is 15 minutes past the hour. I think we're having a great discussion. If we could go on for another 10 minutes, if that's okay with everyone,
Sure.
I think this will be very helpful. I want to shift gears quickly. I'm very curious. A lot of my work deals with emerging technologies. The United States Department of Energy, for example, funds billions of dollars in R&D, research and development of emerging technologies. I'm curious what the role is for emerging technologies that may be playing in your businesses. Are there any particularly interesting technologies maybe you want to highlight for the audience? So in my mind, I'm thinking contactless audits. I'm thinking digitization, advanced data analytics, cheaper sensor technologies. All these kinds of things come to mind. Curious if anything comes to mind for any of you.
Yeah,
Well, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, all of those things. I mean, I think the biggest driver right now is data. It is really data systems. How do we collect actionable data on the systems that are working in a building? And how do you feed that back into the occupancy and the ownership and the operators to be able to have a better experience? So it's the Internet of Things, connectivity. Everybody expects, you don't expect to arrive in a parking lot of university and have to go trying to find a parking spot and then go wander around the halls trying to find the classroom and then wonder if it's going to be warm or hot or ventilated well. You expect that all to be an app on your phone. So your parking is reserved. You have a breadcrumb to where you're supposed to be. You can reserve a seat and you can adjust the air conditioning to your requirements. That is how buildings and people are expecting to occupy buildings now. So we're seeing that kind of technology driven into everything we do. And then renewable energy, their commitment, an entity's commitment to sustainability goals is a differentiator. People will go to one university or another depending on the types of commitments and the facilities that they're presented with. So, it's a differentiator for a lot of people's businesses to stay up on that, not only a commitment to the environment, but also a commitment to, being competitive in their business. So that's what we're seeing. So technology is table stakes now. If you don't do this stuff, you don't compete.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, and I think also this technology is helping us as ESCOs also to open up new opportunities for energy savings. I mean, if you take an example of response time for certain systems, like lighting is very fast. When you switch on or switch off the light, it goes very fast with the switch. But when you have heating systems or cooling systems, especially for a bigger complex or facility, it takes some time before you set that temperature and you get that temperature at the point that you're needing it. So with the artificial intelligence system that you have in the market that look at the weather data, that anticipate the next couple of hours what will happen outside the building, what will happen inside the building, and actually try to seamlessly match the demand with the available cooling and heating in those facilities. So yeah, definitely the developments in digital are enabling the ESCOs to deliver more solutions.
Yeah, and then I'm sorry, Masood, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there was a, the grid edge is where money is being made now, where cash flow is being created, where you've got the interaction between the grid suppliers, and then you've got the users at the end, and where that interface is where money's being made, because the strain on the utility companies in the US, they're willing to pay demand response money to curtail load, and if you have a really good interface with that, you can actually create extra cash flow towards the customer from the utility company. So the utility company becomes a revenue source, not just a bill they have to pay. So that's a very important element into building the economics of an ESCO project in the US, is how do you utilize the the demand response utility programs that are available in the marketplace. So that data is key. Control of your building stock and integration into the digital grid, the grid edge is very important.
Masood, go ahead.
Yeah, just I wanted to mention a small thing. Data is very important, but too much data is sometimes joking you also. The reason is why I say this is, it's not in a negative way, but why I say this, that on the other side, the artificial intelligence, all the analytics and all these things are important. The problem is who is receiving that data, who is receiving that information, whether he is able to make use of it or not. That's very important. That is something to do with human resources. We need to have drastic changes in the human mindset also. So we have to have some trainings, some new kind of development in the maintenance, for example. When you look at the maintenance activities, they are all old style activities going in 3 months, 4 months. People will just mechanically walk there, do their job and move on. The moment you give them a tool that, okay, you can analyze everything and before you reach there, you know what you can do, so then they are very little convinced of it. So I don't know, I mean, we need some training also. And especially David and all the Siemens and other companies could come in handy in giving better training.
So let's talk. Go ahead.
Sorry. Really, you know, as I hear the discussion, you think about the fascinating thing. You know, we're talking about grid edge, Internet of Things, data tracking, apps on your phone, and we're talking about all these things. Remember, this is an efficiency discussion, and yet none of these things we talked about are really dealing with efficiency. And so it really tells you where efficiency has taken us today. So now, you know, back a long, long time ago when there was hair on this head, back in the 70s, efficiency was turning off the lights and it was making it cold, making it hot. It was driving slow, and all these things in the US, that's what we experienced in the 1970s when efficiency was born. And it was basically meant to make you uncomfortable, and it meant to restrict what you did. And now we take efficiency to today, and we expect not just performance spaces, that we have proper ventilation, that we have proper lighting, and that we have great indoor air quality. We now expect to have all types of efficiency things at our fingertips and things revolving around us, literally tracking us on our phone, knowing where we need to go, where to park. It's really fascinating to see the vast change over a 40-year window of what we expect efficiency to be. But I think more revealing is it tells us how integrated efficiency is with everything we do. And so what it turns out is that a building that doesn't have efficiency, frankly, doesn't have modernization. It just doesn't have all the characteristics that we expect from a properly operating building that provides a proper workspace. It's really amazing just to hear the conversation, what we're talking about today.
So I think it really hits me as well. So you see this convergence of efficiency with these other technology trends. Things are rapidly changing. And Masood, you touched on this as well, the importance of training. And so I'm curious to understand from each of you and looking across the regions. I know in the MENA region, training and human capacity building is a really important topic. Tim, on your side, you know, you have led the Federal Energy Management Program, FEMP, which is a U.S. federal agency focused on federal buildings. And so you have a good understanding of what the federal government is doing to make sure that folks have the best trends, have the best technologies, and they are trained. And you also now have on the private sector side, how do ESCO industry professionals stay up to date and make sure that they are aware of the latest technology and best practice trends?
Well, there's a whole myriad of ways they do that. A lot of times people will attend various conferences that highlight these things. My old program, the Federal Energy Management Program, each year offers a big program called Energy Exchange, which is a week's worth of training for facility managers. Within the Energy Services Coalition, the group I mentioned, they do webinars across the country. My organization does a webinar every month highlighting some new technology or some new way of doing business or understanding the energy service company market. But there isn't a university per se. There is really more of just a general aggregation of all the different entities providing various services and training for the industry. It actually performs quite well. Manufacturers want to train the engineers to understand how to use their products, and so they offer sessions. Distributors want to understand how they deliver and install products, so there's a significant training effort there. Governments often have training, like I mentioned, the Energy Exchange, to help their employees understand how best to run their facilities. Probably our weakest place is in some of the state and local governments. Is where we find some of the folks that need the most help in developing the projects and need that support that David mentioned, like an outside party to help them understand the project.
Thanks, Tim. What about in the MENA region, or David, if you have any insights?
I would just echo what Timothy's saying. Teaching people. There's two things we do: is we overlay capabilities remotely using digitization in the cloud. So we have service centers that help the customer to provide that extra capability over the top of their existing folks. We do a lot of training with the folks because it is important that they understand their responsibilities to maintain the energy performance. We can't let that wander off, and that's done on pretty much a monthly real-time basis. But I think again, as we're all saying, the digitization is allowing all of this to happen much more efficiently, much more visibility of what's going on. I think there was a lot of bad press happened with the ESCO business where you'd go for a whole year, and then at the end of the year, you would look back in the rearview mirror and say, oh, look, that was a terrible year. You did really badly. Oh, by the way, your guys weren't maintaining the system for a year. That's a horrible way to work with a customer and a horrible way to perform. So that has all changed. Now it's much more real time. It's much more engaged, and we're seen as an advisor and a partner to the customer for their energy. So the training is drilled into that, and as part of that process, it's very, very important.
Thanks, David.
I saw a funding question from somebody.
Yeah, so well, we only have really 5 minutes left. I could ask the funding question quickly. So there's funding of projects in the US versus the MENA region. There was one specific question for you, David. What does David do when project savings fail to permit self-funding?
It really doesn't happen because the whole process is creating a project that does fund. It is evaluating this, having the expertise and the team that can look at a system very quickly. So the preliminary assessment should give you a good idea of the baseline of that you can work with to understand what kind of project. So it's very rare that we go past a preliminary and do a project that won't self-fund. There are it's not just energy savings, there's water savings, there's operational savings, there's avoided capital savings. We don't typically deal with full-time employee savings where we're going to eliminate employees because that's a social issue that we don't want to deal with. But sometimes customers will say, look, I don't need all these people anymore, I'm going to retire a few people. So there are lots of elements that you can provide savings to a project. So it's unlikely that we would move forward past preliminary with a project that wouldn't self-fund. We'd understand that very early on. That's part of the qualification process. And sometimes customers say, look, I'm getting a grant from the government, typically, especially recently, I'm getting a $3 million grant, and we're going to provide a portion of that to buy the project down. They may see the value, so they're not going to spend $10 million in capital. They're going to spend $2 million in capital over the course. So that they see that as a good win for them. So
thanks, David. So I want to thank all of the audience for the great response, all the questions. If we were not able to get to your question, please, you could pose it to CEBC. You could send us an email, and we could get you in touch with one of the speakers. We just have a few minutes left. I think in these last few minutes, I'd like to ask each of the panelists if you have any just closing thoughts, actually, from your side. Maybe it's a key best practice that you want to share, or maybe it's a key opportunity or challenge. So think of it from the lens of maybe government policymakers who may be watching, or anyone in the commercial sector. So maybe Tim, if you want to go first from your side, just a closing thought.
Sure. What we find that really supports our market is leadership. If a top leader in a government sector that we're working in supports performance contracting, it happens. That's what it comes down to.
Thanks, Tim. Mustafa, any closing thoughts from your side?
Well, I think the closing thoughts is that it was nice to see the similarities that we have in the process of engaging clients and going through that decision maker process, regardless if you have a mature market or let's say an emerging market. And the other thing is that the policy drivers from outside abroad could also help expedite the market here. We have seen that the super ESCOs have been doing a great job, and they're working mainly with the public entities, but there's still so much to do with the private entities and in hospitality, commercial, etc. And that is where we kind of, I think, need also the policymakers to support the region. Yeah.
Thank you. David, any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I'll echo everybody's, government entities, government agencies. This is a fantastic way of really creating great change and really meeting policies for renewable energy and sustainability. It's a fantastic tool. It does need some care and some stewardship from the government. Utilities also should look at it as a great way of reducing their need to create generation, right? Reducing load is a great way of not having to invest in a new generation plant. So any kind, really escalating grants from utilities would be very important. They should be a partner, and access to the capital markets for private entities, enabling that to happen, where investment in these projects, on a capital basis is very important. That really lubricates things. There's a lot of money out there that wants to invest in a project that's guaranteed and backed, by a large company with some government oversight. So, setting that access to capital markets is a key driver in the US also.
Thanks, David. And Masood, from your side.
Yeah, not much other than echoing all other thoughts, except that maybe we have to have more interactions like this to learn from the seniors how they fared in their exams, so that we can answer the same questions in a good way.
Great. I want to thank the panelists, the speakers, for lending your time, your expertise on this topic. This has been very informative. I do appreciate it. A reminder to everyone watching, this will be available, I believe, on YouTube. The CBC YouTube channel, the recording will be available. And I will hand it back off to Rashid or Ahmed to have some closing remarks from CBC.
You're muted, Rashid.
Okay. Yeah, I would say just small wording. There is a motto in France saying the grass is not necessarily green elsewhere. But I guess when it comes to the ESCO industry and ESCO business, I do believe that the grass is green everywhere. As long as there is the weakness of government weakness, is there regulation, establishment of the right regulation, and so on. I do believe that those initiatives that goes to the planet and so on we can all make it happen. And thank you. It was great. It was nice to hearing you.
Thank you, Rashid.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Ahmed, anything else from your side, or are we wrapping up?
I think that's all. Thank you, everyone. And I just put in the chat a link for our upcoming webinar. We will be launching our white paper, Energy Efficiency in the MENA Region, Status and Outlook. It's a very exciting paper, and it should be very useful to everyone who is actually interested in this discussion as well. So please do register, and we'll see you in the webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.